What is up, hotties? Welcome back to another episode of Stay Hot. I'm Blaiden Kirk, joined as always by my two favorite co-hosts of all time, Matthew Sponhour and Theo Ash. We have a great episode planned for you all today, as we're just going to really go over some NFL and NBA narratives that have been floating around over the past couple of days. But before we get into that, Matt, Theo, how are you guys doing today on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon?
I'm great. I'm fantastic. I am watching a bunch of Quentin Johnston, and that should be out by the time that you guys are.
I was about to say, you just made a video on this, which will be interesting considering, you know, we're going to talk about Jackson Smith-Njigba in his 40 time. Mm-hmm. But we won't get into that yet. We first have to hear how Matt's doing.
I'm doing good. I'm excited to get back to Cincinnati tomorrow. I'm really pumped for that. And to get back into a normal routine. Like I very much need to. So,
your house is done?
It's
finally.
It's done. It's just about completely done. I'm moving back in, whether they like it or not at this point. But tomorrow I face the challenge of driving from Nashville to Oxford to get my car, back to Cincinnati, and then moving everything out of my room because my room was used to put everything that was in the kitchen in it. So the pantry shelf that we have is in there. My entire bed, like it's you can't even walk through it. It's like completely full, and I have to do that so I can have somewhere to sleep.
All before the amp live too,
and I have to do the amp live too. So big day tomorrow. But
you all better make it worth it for Matt. So come join the amp live tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time, or I guess for you it would be today, right? For the people listening, it would be today, Thursday, at 6 p.m. Eastern.
What did you guys think of Nashville? I've never been, but that's a place that I've always kind of wanted to go.
It's been pretty fun, I think. So last night we're out at this like rooftop bar, and I'm looking on stage at like the band playing, and I'm like, the bass player looks really familiar. And it turns out it was my guitar teacher from 10 years ago.
That's big time to be performing at a bar in Nashville.
He's been doing like crazy. He's been doing like really, really well. He goes on tour a lot. I think he did like 4 million streams on like his new label. So he's been like crushing it low key. So it's really kind of cool to see.
Yeah, that's small world. But yeah, how's the food there, Matt? I saw that you posted your coleslaw,
and I had another one. I took somebody else's, and I didn't post it, and I almost took another after that. Coleslaw is wonderful. This was very good slaw. We had some Nashville hot chicken from Prince's, and it was very, very good. I got a medium hotness, and it was still too hot for me. I have no embarrassment with. I can't handle spicy stuff like it at all. Sorry, I'm not cool. I don't power through it well. Hurts my tummy. Nope. Don't like it. But it was spicy, but it was right at the top of what I could handle. Yeah. I liked it a lot.
I got the hotness, and if I had gotten any hotter, it wouldn't have been enjoyable anymore.
Yeah, they've got like hot or something and like a crown next to it. And I'm sure that would kill me. So other than that, I really liked it. It's a really nice city. It's so crazy. Broadway Street is so crazy, man. It's really like just 100 musical acts all within a few blocks of each other. So, I mean, I knew the music scene was big in Nashville, but I didn't really get it until I saw it.
Single bar and restaurant, if they can have live music, they do have live music. Like every single one. It's insane. And yet I'm not performing.
I've got to get out there. Someday.
Get tachyons out here. Come on. Nah, it's cool. But no, it's been a blast, I think. But yeah, we could talk about you've been watching Quentin Johnston, and JSN just ran the 40 today at his pro day and went 4.53. And I think that's a little bit faster than people expected. Matt and I were talking earlier. I think people had this expectation for JSN to have this athletic profile of like David Bell. David Bell went like 4.7 at the combine and was just like a total non-athlete, but he had good hands. It was like, oh, but he's a good receiver. It's like JSN, A, has much more quickness than that. And B, he ran a 4.53 today, which I think is like real speed. And I think that will definitely carry a lot more weight in him getting drafted higher at this point now.
Yeah, people are overthinking this one a little bit. He's not a burner. He is on, slower, but Jesus Christ, man, the way people talk about him has just been nuts. And if he had actually played this year, I think we wouldn't have had to go through this whole process. I think he's going to be wide receiver 1. I think he's going to go really high. I think he's going to be really good in the NFL immediately. I think I don't know. Sure, the ceiling on how good he can be is maybe a little bit lower because he doesn't have the long speed. He doesn't, change the game in that way. But overall, dude's good at being a receiver, gets open. And that might mean that he gets called Slant Boy. He might, adopt that nickname, but yards are yards. They're still going to count.
Yeah.
It's a really good time for him, the 4.3. And I think that there is a bit of a limit on just how high he can get taken just because he doesn't fit the mold of guys who get taken high. I mean, this is something I talk about at the beginning of the Quentin Johnston video, but when you look at the guys who get taken in the top 10 at wide receiver, it's Jalen Waddle, it's Garrett Wilson, it's Drake London, it's Jamar Chase, it's, Calvin Johnson, it's Corey Davis. These were all like very athletic, outside, down the field, explosive athlete. Like those are the guys who go top 10. So I don't think that JSN, he would be kind of the first slot only guy to ever go quite that high. If he's like the first wide receiver off the board and everything like that, I can't ever remember it happening where someone with his profile, even though he did run a good time, someone who only played in the slot in college would be the first wide receiver off the board. Usually slot only is like a knock that an evaluator will give someone that they don't really like. Like, yeah, you can play in the slot, but so I think he still has a chance to be the first wide receiver off the board, though. I do think that he has a chance to break that trend. And I think if we're going to look at maybe a high end, and I can't remember if I said this on the AMP or the podcast. I know that I said it in my mock draft on Substack. But if we're going to give him a really high end player, like a really lofty player to comp him to, like we do for all the athletic guys when I see Quentin Johnston get compared to T. Higgins with more yak ability or Julio Jones or something like that. Like you see it all the time. JSN, you don't really see that. But if you really wanted to give a really high end comparison for him, it would be Travis Kelce, I think. Like someone who is just crafty and clever and smart and gets open and, always seems to know where the defense is and what angles to take after the catch and still creates lots of yards after catch. Same thing with Kupp. Maybe that's someone who gets comped a little bit more often since he's a wide receiver. But if you really, really wanted to say, like, is this guy worth taking in the top 10? Like, look at his production at such a young age. I think that Kelce is probably the guy that you would look to the most, or Kupp for JSN. Those are so lofty that I don't like giving it. I still will stick with the Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I would be pretty happy if the Packers took him at like 15, for example.
Yeah. I know PFF posted in their like analysis of him, their one like snippet quote was, if you have a defined slot role in your offense, then he should be your wide receiver 1. Otherwise, he shouldn't even be on your board. I think I would be open to even designing a slot role for him if you don't have one. Just because I think like he makes quarterback's job so much easier. That's what Kelce does. That's what Kupp does. Right. I couldn't imagine being like, well, we don't really use slot guys in our offense.
Yeah, I think it's not so much that because everyone is in 11 personnel and someone's got to be in you can't have 3 outside receivers. There's only 2 sidelines, but
we play 40 football now.
I think a lot of teams maybe have the take that a lot of different guys can produce from the slot. Like you don't go against corner ones a lot. You have the freedom to release both directions. And so it's just a little bit easier. You don't need to spend a top 20 pick on a guy who can win from the slot because it's just easier than the outside. But you see that starting to change in the NFL, and CeeDee Lamb is a guy who plays a lot in the slot. Devontae Adams is a guy that the Packers would always move down into the slot because they're like, well, if it's unstoppable anyway and it's easy to get the ball to the slot guy, why not just put our best player there, Kelce, Kupp. So I feel like more than past years, there is an acceptance to taking a wide receiver who moves like JSN highly. I mean, I would even say like Drake London last year. Drake London was an outside guy. Like he was a deep threat. He caught a lot of go balls, contested catches down the sideline. But if Drake London were to have ran the 40, it would not have been a 4.4. It would have been like a 4.5 or a 4.6. What it was really, I kind of compared Drake London to Cooper Kupp, even though he was getting a lot of Mike Evans comps, just because I thought he was a little bit more of a security blanket, a big body who moved well and created separation underneath and was kind of bounced off tackles in yards after catch. So
I fell in love with Drake London over. I felt that was his slot performances were what made me so high on him. I'm like, he is literally unguardable from the slot because like linebackers just aren't big enough or fat or like they're not athletic enough to hang with him.
He wasn't some crazy athlete. Like he was a bit of a crazy athlete, but he wouldn't have been a crazy testing athlete, I think. Right. Like he didn't have the crazy long speed. He was athletic in other ways, like play strength at the catch point or body control. And those are all things that JSN is good at. And I don't want to say like London and JSN are like perfect parallels. They're not. But London wasn't some like crazy, Julio, even Mike Evans, who always got compared to. Always thought that was a little dumb because he didn't have that kind of like take the top off the defensibility. But I don't know. Maybe that opens up a world where like JSN, who's also not a crazy testing, or I should even say that because he's going to have like an elite RAS, but
his
maybe
testing
not like
was really good.
Crazy long speed, maybe that's the better way to put it. He's not a crazy like track athlete. Maybe London going in like 8th or whatever he went opens up a reality where JSN also goes pretty high.
And look, man, it really all does come back down to one single thing. If you are leading these Ohio State receiving rooms, there's no way you can do that as a fluke. There's no getting like, oh well, I've just been put in this perfect situation. You gotta be special. There's guys getting drafted at 12 who couldn't cut it in the Ohio State receiving room, and I've said before, I think it's totally bogus to say that he just got schemed open. I think he's really special. I think that Utah game was really special. And who was not playing in that? Olave and Garrett Wilson weren't in that game, and he had his best game ever, right? The body control is really ridiculous with him, knows where to be. He's going to be the type of guy who is going to piss people off the way he gets 1,300 yards. It's going to make people angry. It's going to be, no, but this doesn't count. No.
It's like, how?
It's something that I myself have fallen victim to, where it's like, man, Kelsey, like he's just wide open all the time. Like he just catches it. No one is around him. Same thing with Kupp. No one is around him. And then you look at someone like Kittle, who, will just moss people and run guys over and pancake them. And
it's
clearly that's better. But really, yards, it's actually the same thing.
Right. It production is ultimately what matters. And if you're just catching a bunch of first downs all the time, you're catching a bunch of first downs all the time. And that's almost what like Garrett Wilson versus JSN is like. I still think like Garrett Wilson is probably the better prospect than JSN. Yes. But JSN was the guy, like Garrett Wilson was, climbing the ladder and mossing people and hitting crazy yards after catch, juke moves and moving in ways that no other wide receiver is moving. And you're like, wow. And JSN isn't really moving quite the same way, but JSN was the more productive player. And there are players that are maybe more talented than him at the NFL level, but he still may outpace them. Like just because he is so crafty, and the speed was a great time. Like the speed doesn't even like matter. And I joked about it, like, oh, he was ducking the 40. He's going to run like a 4.7, 4.8. Like, and the reason I was joking about that is because it doesn't fucking matter for him. Like he could run whatever time. Like what's on tape is what's on tape. I still, even though he ran a 4.3, I still don't think he has like crazy home run speed now. 5.3. I don't like actually think he's faster than I thought he was. Because I already see how fast he is. He's not like going to take the top out of defense, even if he is running a 4.3, probably. But
5.3.
It doesn't matter because that doesn't have to be his game.
Not 4.3, 4.53.
Yeah, 4.5. My fault.
4.53 is what I think. Do you understand what I'd be saying on the Bird app if he ran a 4.3 in his 40 men, he would have like his RAS would be like State. A 10.
If you ran a 4.3, I would legitimately not care because I would know like they're fudging the numbers somehow. Like that cannot have happened.
He didn't play this past year. He didn't play this past year, so he actually got faster.
He got faster.
He like hit second puberty, and he's now the greatest wide receiver ever.
I can't believe it that he got hurt. It cost Ohio State a national title. That's so annoying. And the same thing happened to Nick Bosa, and he was going to have an unbelievable year too. I can't believe it, man.
Do you think that he could have played at the end and he quit on Ohio State, like some say?
I don't know. I have no idea. I had an opinion on this, but I forgot what it was. I think I was leaning towards if he spent the whole year, like, it wasn't like he got hurt and then he was just like out. He came back. I saw him play. Me and my dad went to the Iowa game, and he wasn't himself at all. And it was a hamstring, right? Or am I?
Yeah, I think it was.
I think that if he was like borderline for the Ohio State-Michigan game, and then he opts entirely out of a game a month away, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I kind of felt like if he really was injured to the point where he knew he wasn't going to be able to play in a game that was set from a month from now, how was he questionable for the Michigan game that he didn't play in, if that makes sense? So I kind of thought that maybe, like, if he had wanted to play, he could have at least, like, what was the point of opting out? He could have just not opted out and been like, yeah, if I can't go, I can't go. All you do by opting out is giving yourself no chance. And apparently he had a chance to play in the Michigan game, so why not a month later? You don't think you have any hope? So I don't blame him. The thing is that hamstrings, you don't want to mess with that. You don't want to mess with that. So I don't blame him one bit, but I do kind of think that he opted out for the sake of, like, he maybe could have gone, but decided it was not worth the risk. And even in that scenario where it's the playoffs, I kind of agree with him, because you could really mess yourself up if you play on a bad hamstring.
I think that's the right take. I think that, he probably could have played and held himself out, or at least didn't want to take the risk. And that's fine, because millions and millions and millions of dollars are on the line.
100%. 100%. So we should have won anyway, really too. So who cares? That's still on us.
Facts.
Us.
Facts. Me. On you. Just you.
I love calling your sport, referring to like you and your sports teams as we.
People are like, you're not on the team. Yes, I am.
Well, I am.
Speaking of the team, Blaiden, speaking of being on the team, you just traded for Elijah Moore from the Jets. They gave up their second round pick for Elijah Moore and a third. How are you feeling about the state of the Cleveland Browns in this moment?
I mean, the real thing that I'm upset about is that we brought back Anthony Walker. All Browns fans seem to love him. I don't know why. He's the last.
Does he get a lot of tackles?
He's like Joe Schobert. Tackles. Not even cleanup tackles. He's the last man to the football. No, but I mean, Elijah Moore. My big thing is, like, how much has he even played in the past couple of years? And I know that it's like, always had Zach Wilson throwing to him. Well, Garrett Wilson balled out with Zach Wilson. Garrett Wilson, yes, whole different prospect. What did we do? We basically traded a second for a third, and then we get Elijah Moore. You traded back
exactly 32 spots. So you traded back around,
and we get Elijah
Garrett
Moore.
Wilson. Or not Garrett Wilson. Jesus,
I wish. No, I mean, he'll be battling with Donovan Peoples-Jones for that wide receiver 2 spot. There'll be like 2-3. I mean, at this point, anything's an upgrade from like David Bell and Anthony Schwartz. Those guys stink. So I guess from that perspective, it's fine. Again, the thing that I'm most worried about with the Browns, we could have really done without the receiver. But the thing that I think is most important, we got the defensive line guys. That was really huge. I would have liked to have seen us make a bigger move at linebacker. And then, to my knowledge, we haven't really done anything at safety. Or no, we got the guy from Kansas City. We did do that. So
Thornhill is
one
whatever,
third, but it's someone. John Johnson was getting cooked all last year, so whatever.
So who was the wide receiver 3 for the Browns before?
It would have either been David Bell or Anthony Schwartz.
Man.
There was another guy, Michael Woods, I think, was getting significant reps. So we needed someone to fill that wide receiver 3 spot. And I do think Peoples-Jones will probably be the wide receiver 2 just because he's been there. But if Moore comes in and balls out, like, I'm not mad.
I really liked Moore coming out of Ole Miss. I really, really liked Moore coming out of Ole Miss. He had great hands. He catches everything. Like, he can make subtle adjustments, catch the balls that are behind him, catch things through contact. He's not a big guy, so he's not going to go up and like moss you, but he is someone who has very, very reliable hands. And I think that it has translated to the NFL level. Looking at it now, it looks like PFF did not chart him with a single drop this season. He played about 50. That's a good question. We're on Larry Fitzgerald to watch with Elijah Moore. Since he played with Zach Wilson too, so he might actually he might be up there. Hold on. Anyway, so yes, he's very reliable hands. I think after the catch, he's got a lot of quickness and agility. I do think that he suffers a little bit from DeAndre Swift syndrome, where like he'll not just take it upfield when he needs to take it upfield, and will instead like run backwards or sideways or something. And you're like, just go. I get that you can like make guys miss, but like it's time to go downhill right now. That's something that I've noticed a couple times when I watch Elijah Moore, is like he is dynamic, but sometimes I think he's got to rein it in a little bit. I think that this year especially, you noticed he obviously wanted to trade, so he wasn't maybe trying his absolute hardest on every single route. But he's someone with a lot of talent and definitely clears any other option that the Browns could throw out there in the slot. He has inside-out versatility. He had 50% of his snaps in the slot this year, about exactly 50 outside. So, you can line him up wherever. He's got a pretty good skill set. A smaller guy, so maybe never going to be dominant, but could definitely be a very useful player in a receiving core for a team that definitely needs some skill position depth. So I like it. Trade down 32 picks in the draft. There's really not a lot of receivers that I would take over. I guess that's Elijah the point, Moore, is that like,
because we gave up pick what? What pick did we give up? It was 42. I think
it was like 46 or something. It's 46. In the 40s.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably not getting...
You were right, Blaiden. It was 42.
Look at me. Zay Flowers probably isn't. That's the only guy that I think you're really close to on that kind of a spectrum, if you're talking about guys with that kind of like big play after the catch ability. That's probably the only guy that I would really, really like. Tank Dell, I don't think is comparable. Who else might be there? Addison. I don't even think Addison would be there.
No, I think at 42, you're shot on receiver unless you're moving up. Maybe Downs is there. I mean, like one could fall that far, but there's a lot of teams that need receiver. And It's just, especially when you get into those high second round picks, they're going to be glad to get those guys. And I think once you get past, I mean, who is it? Flowers, Downs, Addison, Johnston, and JSN. There's your 5 after that. Who are you taking at 42?
I guess there's Hyatt and there's like A.T. Perry. So maybe you could get a guy like that. But according to like PFF's trade value grades, like moving down those 32 picks is about an equivalent value to like a 4th round pick. So that's early day 3. For Elijah Moore, it's a good process to me.
It's not bad. You're probably not getting a receiver of that caliber in the draft, at least not this year. So I'm not mad at it. I don't know. I think he's
on a cheap deal. It's like a 4th round equivalent like grade if you look at the numbers, I guess. So yeah, I thought that this was I thought it was a savvy move by Cleveland, actually. And I think it builds on a strong offseason for them. Like, I know that you don't like the Walker signing, but man, they signed 2 good defensive linemen, and they got a good wide receiver for just moving back in the draft a handful of picks. Like, man, I think that they're doing a good job, actually.
Yeah, it's just like, it's a good job, but if we aren't really good this year, it's going to look gross for the upcoming seasons. And it's going to look gross, right? With the Deshaun Watson cap hit, it's going to be a monstrosity to deal with. Many core players are probably going to be gone. So that's the only thing that scares me. But yes, I think like the defensive line moves were outstanding. This is obviously a good move. The only thing that's really a little disappointing is the Walker signing. I don't even think we brought back Taki. I think I would have rather have had him and then maybe Wagner. I think that would have been a better group of guys to have than what we have right now. But I digress. We'll live.
Yeah, I think this is a big year for the Browns offense. I mean, with Watson last season, there were some people saying that they were going to be.
Brissett was better than him. Brissett outplayed him.
This could end in an all-time Browns disaster. I'm not saying I'm predicting it, but I am saying he's got like 5 games. And if he doesn't look good out the gate now, dude, it's the worst. It's the worst team building moment in Browns history, which is saying something. So there's a lot of pressure on them.
It would be the worst team building moment in NFL history to give someone with those allegations that contract,
and that trade completely fall apart. Yeah.
So they got to get some receivers to make it like, at least they could, even if he maybe on film isn't like being a total difference maker, which again, I'm not predicting, but at least make it easy for like to look at the box score and say like, oh, he's doing a decent job. They'll probably take another receiver. They could maybe take a receiver like again, just to like make sure they have 3 good ones.
All I'm saying is if this doesn't work out, how long do you think we'll go before teams will just like stop trading for quarterbacks like this? Because
probably
Russell Wilson,
because Stafford won a Super Bowl.
I guess Stafford worked out, but like, and I guess the Jets are probably about to do it with Rodgers, but like I'm looking at like Russ, complete disaster. Watson, if it is a complete disaster. I mean, those are 2 teams that just like completely are screwed now.
It is a copycat league. And if it doesn't work out, that could scare teams away. But I still think that we're close enough to the Stafford winning a Super Bowl thing.
But the Stafford trade within itself, like, okay, it won them a Super Bowl. So it worked the way that they wanted it to. But it only worked because the Rams had a stacked roster and they got it done that year. From a zoom out, let's say that like any other team besides the Los Angeles Rams make that trade, it's a horrible one. It's like almost on par with Russ or Watson. Not quite, but like they gave him a huge contract, give up 2 firsts, and right now like he's not good. And it looks like they're going to be trying to get a quarterback next year. And again,
it almost didn't work out. They had to trade for Vaughn and Odell.
And they had to hit that pass to Cup at the end of the Buccaneers game. Do you remember?
Yeah,
to get him in
which was a dot. Which was a dot.
I mean,
obviously,
it was a good
they got
trade,
what they paid for there, but it's very like it barely worked, and that's it barely worked. And if anything went wrong, if that holding penalty wasn't called at the end of the game in the Super Bowl, like maybe they just leave empty-handed, and their team is totally terrible now. So I see what you're saying.
Right. So it worked. You won a Super Bowl, so you can be, bad forever now. And the trade was perfect. It's like it's almost like the Anthony Davis trade in that sense. It worked, but like, man, you look back on the value and you do kind of wonder a little bit, although I'd say with that, that's a whole different thing. The Lakers screwed themselves over with other trades really, but
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the one saving grace could be like if Rodgers comes and like completely fixes the Jets, but dog, he's 40.
That's the thing, man. Like Rodgers, father time unbeaten, man. I think there's a real, and how many? So if Rodgers gets moved, is He's not getting a new deal, is he? How many more years does he have?
I don't think he's getting a new deal. I think it'll come down to how much money do the Packers take versus how much money do the Jets take, because he's on the hook for like $60 million this year, I think.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that's the thing. I
really don't think Rodgers is getting traded for like that much, though. I really don't.
I think it'll be a 1. That's what it seemed right to me. Just a 1.
I think it's going to be a 1 next year is what I think is going to happen.
Well,
if the Jets trade for Rodgers and still have their first round pick this year, that's crazy.
It's interesting. You know what? I guess I hadn't thought about this till now, but really, if you're the Jets, you don't care as much about is it going to be a first and a third, or is it going to be this year's first or next year's first? That's whatever. You really care about how much money you are taking versus that's probably what the big hang up is how much money does each team have to take? And I would think that matters far more to the Jets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to check up more on honestly, as a Packers fan, I'm pretty behind on exactly how much money, what the agreement would be and what's all on the table when it comes to who has to take the amount of money, certain
I believe you can change who is giving the guaranteed money. I think the standard is that you pay the guaranteed money no matter what in a trade like that. But I remember very specifically Brock Osweiler traded basically to get off of the cash on that deal, and the Browns got a second to take them. So yes. I know for a fact you can take guaranteed money.
Same thing with the Baker deal, right? It all came down to how much money is each team taking. So I guess NFL contracts they're pretty vague, and I'm always a little bit unsure about where each side of the money is coming from. It's a big war on Packers Twitter right now. Will we be able? Who has the leverage? Who has the leverage? Will we be able to get, as Justice would say, 13 for 12? Pick 13 for 12. I am probably a bit of a Brian Gutekunst suppressive person, and am a little bit pessimistic that we're going to get a pick that high for someone who just clearly is not going to be on the team next year. And you could say well, then who the Jets need to have a quarterback. And I think with Matthew Stafford being available and, with Zach Wilson still on the roster, I can't imagine they'd run it back with him actually, but maybe they could bluff that they could. I think that it could drag out a bit past the draft because neither team really has any leverage. The Packers can't bring him back and the Jets can't not trade for him is kind of what it seems like right now. So it's who has the leverage? No one. It just has to happen.
Right.
And neither team can afford to not have it happen. So I think it's going to just drag on past the draft. And I think next year's first is going to be the compromise because the Packers probably want pick 13, right? The Jets don't want to give up pick 13 because if they have Rodgers, their pick next year won't be as high. But who knows, right? These are the kinds of trades that the Broncos and the Seahawks made, and the Seahawks ended up with a really high pick, and the Lions ended up with a really high pick because of the Stafford trade this year. So who knows? It probably won't happen, but maybe next year's first is the compromise they end up going to, is I think kind of where I'm at.
I think the Packers have the leverage.
You do?
Easily.
You're not alone in that line of thought.
Okay, let's say they don't pull off the trade, the Packers. What happens? Rodgers is away from the team. You don't get a first-round pick. If the Jets don't pull off the trade, disaster. The Packers are doing the same thing. Whether or not they trade Rodgers, it's basically the same. Now they're going to be missing out on our first, but the plan is still going accordingly. Essentially, you're starting Love and you've got these pieces and okay, yada, yada, yada. If the Jets don't get Rodgers, you're screwed. Now there's some other options out there. You could go after Stafford. I don't think that'd work. I think he looked really bad last year and that's super risky. You could maybe see if Tannehill's there. That could possibly work, but we don't even know if he's actually available. You could go after Lamar, but that would be pretty darn crazy to just be welp, we didn't get Rodgers. I guess we're going to go make this insane investment, And
I would say that if they don't get Rodgers, they're screwed for this year, but they're not screwed for the next 5. You know, like their window is still open to try again next season with somebody else because they have young pieces. It's not an old team that needs to win right now because they've got Garrett Wilson, they've got Sauce Gardner, they've got Quinnen Williams, they've got, you know, Jermaine Johnson, who they drafted in the first round. They've got DJ Reed. Like none of these guys are old. Like this team should be pretty good for the next couple years. So they could say like, yeah, man, Rodgers will retire and you get nothing instead of our second round picks. You know, or Corey Davis.
I don't know,
or,
man.
Whoever
if they were thinking that long term, would they be trading for Rodgers? I don't think you can
for
just
the right price.
Punt
they
on
would
the
be
season. And if
I don't know,
if you don't get Rodgers, you're punting. The AFC is insane. So I don't know. I think it'll come down to just the first flat, but I think the Packers probably have a little bit more leverage, in my opinion, but both do need to get it
maybe
done.
But there's no other team that wants to trade for Rodgers is the thing. Like there's no buyer's market to drive the price up. It's just the Jets. And if the Jets say like, man, even if we get Rodgers, who said that he almost retired and probably is gone next year, and you know, maybe he isn't even good enough to win the AFC these days. Like if we miss out on him, like, okay, I guess we'll try again next year with something that's a bit more sustainable because the window to compete in the AFC, like maybe it isn't even right now. And if they say something like that and they're like, we were your only buyer and now we're leaving and we'll like reset the timeline or whatever, and we'll try again next year. I don't know, like, what does that do for the Packers? Does Rodgers just retire and the Packers get nothing for him? It's interesting. I'm very fascinated to see what they end up getting.
I think you're kind of right. That's a good point. I mean,
because I see what you're saying too. I really do see and I see what everyone who's like, you know, the Jets have.
It's such an interesting situation, man. Something like this has never happened before that I can remember, where it's like both teams got to make this trade, and there's nobody. There's like no outside factors.
There's no other. There's no one else who wants this guy. They're bidding. There's no bidding war. They can't call and say Washington just offered us pick 15 or 17 or whatever they have. So pick 13 would be just a little bit more. Like they can't say that because that's not happening, you know? So
it wouldn't even matter because Rodgers, he ain't going to go play for Washington regardless.
Right. No, Rodgers came out and said like, I want to play for the Jets. I will be a Jet. And so like at that point, it's like, well, Rodgers wants to be a Jet and we want Rodgers. Why are you digging your heels in and just muddling this all up when we're not going to give you these picks? You know, like you can either have nothing or you can have the second round pick or even next year's first, which will probably be like, hopefully if you're the Jets in the late 20s. And so but then
again, the Packers are going to be like, oh, if you're only going to give us a first next year, then you're taking most of the money.
Yeah, that could also be, and maybe it is something boring like that where it's a second round.
We should get Brad. We'll get Brad Spielberger on and have him hash this out for us.
Yeah, I might just DM him and just ask him what the hell is going on.
It's like, dog, please explain the cap to me again. Oh no, but Matt, did you want to? I know you wanted to talk a little bit about Zion.
Yeah,
you posed the question: would you give up the Donovan Mitchell package for a guy like Zion? What was the results on that, by the way?
It's about 50-50, slightly favoring no. I bring this up because Kendrick Perkins said, if I were the Pelicans, I'd be looking to trade him. And people are like, oh, what the hell is this guy talking about? He's not totally crazy. All right. This is not some like insane, makes no sense. Now, should the Pelicans trade Zion? No, because I don't think that they'd get a Donovan Mitchell offer at all. People have this idea, that Zion Williamson is eventually going to just start playing and start being in it consistently. And he'll never be like an 82 game a year guy, even though literally nobody is in the NBA. So who cares? But he may never be a 60 game guy, is I feel like what you would have to think if you're the Pelicans. He's averaged 30 games a year so far in his career. And it's not like he had some big major injury year one and he had to sit out the first like year and a half and it took a long time from rehab or something like that messed up, or it was a situation where he had to have multiple surgeries when he only thought he had to have one. No, he has just consistently had lower body injuries over and over, man. And his play style and his size, I just don't think that's ever going to stop with him, is basically what I'm what I'm thinking. So I pose a question. Would you give up a Donovan Mitchell trade package? I don't know exactly what that'd be, but a Donovan Mitchell trade package for Zion. I think people saying yes are crazy. I think that's crazy. I know Joel Embiid was hurt early in his career, and he's turned it around a good amount now, even though Joel Embiid gets hurt in the playoffs all the time. Like, Joel Embiid is incredibly injury prone, and it's a huge problem for the 76ers. And it's one of the worst things about their chances to try to go win a title. It makes it tough, but I just don't know if you can expect that with Zion. And I think if a team put their eggs in that basket, they would be insane to do it. Trade the whole future for somebody who has gotten through a real number of games one time in 4 years, when it's already so hard for any players to get through a full NBA season. And you see this happen to guys like a Gordon Hayward. He cannot possibly, it's not like, oh, he has a chance to play 70 games. He has no hope. It's not going to happen. That's not how the NBA works. Anthony Davis, he is not going to get through 70 games ever again. It's okay. People think about it like the NFL. Like, you get an injury prone guy, but with 17 games, you're rolling the dice. Maybe they play 3 games, but they could also play 15. It could happen, right? It's not like that in the NBA. It's more like a pitcher. It's not quite like that, but it's more like this guy simply cannot get through this many games. It's too hard. It's too physically taxing. And almost nobody can actually do it in the NBA anymore with any consistency. Almost nobody plays 82 games.
That's why I'm trading for him. I'm giving up the Donovan Mitchell package, and I'm anticipating and I'm praying that Adam Silver shortens the regular season.
And it's seriously, I mean, how many injury, and there's some examples of it turning around. Embiid somewhat. Curry had his ankle problems, and for the most part, he's been more of like a roll the dice injury guy. He's been healthy enough, obviously, for the Warriors to win some titles, even though the injuries have been a problem. But I just think in the NBA, every single year, you know who's going to win the title this season? Whichever contender is the healthiest. That is all it comes down to, almost. Whichever one of them is the healthiest. Every single season since I can remember, it has been the exact same thing. If so-and-so had been healthy, this team probably would have won, but they weren't. Think about the Warriors. In 2015, they played the Cavs that were so hurt that they were starting Tristan Thompson and Mozgov together in the NBA Finals. Then they played in 2016, and people would blame Curry being hurt for that loss. Then in 2017, Kawhi got hurt, and they won that series. 2018, Chris Paul gets hurt in a series that I really think they would have lost. 2019, they get hurt, and the Raptors win. This is just how the NBA works. So I think not taking into account a player's like ridiculously injury-prone history, and if I feel bad for Zion because it's not his fault, I don't think. He's one of the bigger NBA players, I think outside of Steven Adams, and that's part of his game, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but I just don't think his lower body can keep up. And I think that if he dropped a bunch of weight, he wouldn't be that just doesn't fit his play style. That just butts heads. Right. So I really hope that he can consistently play because he really is one of the most fun players to watch. But I just think if you don't take into account the injury proneness and the injury history and you just sell your whole future to go trade for him, it'd be a big mistake. And I think the Pelicans are in a really tough spot because of it.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This was a concern when Zion was getting drafted, right?
Yeah, it was a little bit.
It wasn't broke his bad, shoe. Though. Didn't he break his shoe?
That was a little bit different. That was such a big deal because that was like a huge game. Everyone got pumped up to watch, if I remember correctly. Yeah, and then he ripped through his shoe and it ruined it.
Yeah,
because he got. It was a concern about the injury stuff, but you could also say that for John Morant, who went number 2 that year. Yeah. Is that people are worried about his injury stuff, and it hasn't been nearly as bad as Zion's, but they're like, oh, this is kind of a Derrick Rose type player, and that could lead to Derrick Rose type injuries. So I think all this is to say that the Pelicans probably can't do anything at this point. I do think you're going to have some years where you probably get 60 games out of them, and 70 is maybe possible some years. And your best bet is to roll the dice on that, because if you trade them, I don't think you'll get equal value. Like your best path to contending is hoping you get lucky with the Zion injury stuff. But I think that if you're at a big disadvantage health-wise, it's hard to win a title.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to win a title because I think that's the most important
I was a
thing.
bit surprised to see just how many people voted yes on the Donovan Mitchell package. I would be down to trade for him if he was available. I would call. I would be interested in taking the chance. Like, yeah, maybe because Curry's ankle injuries were thought to be like debilitating early in his career. Same thing with Joel Embiid, like as you mentioned. And I would be hopeful that a guy like Zion maybe would figure it out as time went on. Like they would eventually find out a weight or whatever it is that worked for him, and he started to put together maybe not 70 game seasons like you were saying, but so I would be interested in trading for him. But like the Donovan Mitchell package is one of the biggest trade packages that has ever been traded at any time. I just don't know if he would demand quite that much when he hasn't shown any ability to stay healthy. But I'm not quite as
maybe I'm taking this just a step too far, but I think I stand by my point that people are probably not being pessimistic enough about it. Unfortunately, I think it's really, really bad. And I think but the Pelicans still have all these picks. I don't know. They're a very weird team. They're in a very weird spot right now. If they were healthy, they'd be so good.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I was the Pelicans, I think that'd be my course of action. It's just like, well, let's see if one of these years it happens. I don't know.
Great point, Matthew. It's like, all this is to say, you don't do anything and keep doing exactly what the Pelicans are doing. But I'm just being negative and harsh, I guess.
It's always interesting when you put out a poll and the results are as split as that poll's results were. So it's an interesting discussion point. Anytime that you say anything that truly creates like a 50-50 yes, no split. So it's definitely worth talking about. And I mean, this is something that we were saying before the season, and here he is hurt again. So yeah, it's interesting. What's more interesting in the NBA, there is a war on LeBron.
Oh my God.
being pushed across the league right now.
As usual.
People say he's not scary to guard. People do not fear lining up against LeBron. Matt, if you were guarding LeBron James, what emotions would you feel?
I'd feel honored to have the chance to guard him.
Honored.
But fear, I'm afraid, would not be there. And if it was Michael Jordan, possibly, if we want to compare, I'd be very scared of Michael Jordan. And that's a big reason why I have Michael Jordan as the GOAT, because of scariness. And I don't know. I 100% agree. Like this is ridiculous. And I feel like I lean pretty heavily into I don't necessarily trust everything that players say about other players. I think they are biased and emotional like analysts too. And just because they've played in the NBA, like no one's scared of LeBron. Well, like, I guess, like, how do you even really talk about that? How do you like argue that? He makes it to the finals like 8 years in a row, but he wasn't scary doing it, I guess. Sure.
Okay.
So many of these NBA debates are just like words.
It's not debating basketball. You're debating what a word means. And I like to do it a little bit, but oh my God, super team, superstar. You're never debating how good the players are. You're debating what is a super team. What is a superstar specifically?
What is legendary?
And it's nothing. Because it's a made up term. It doesn't have a set meaning. So it could be whatever you want it to be. And those are the worst ones. At least legendary has like a definition. But that one's pretty much the same way.
We had JJ Redick reading from the dictionary on First Take because of this debate. He pulled the definition of fear. He pulled out his phone and read off the definition of fear. That is where NBA dialogue is at these days.
We're reading let me pull out the thesaurus real
and
quick.
He's like, fear is the state of, I don't know what the definition of fear is off the top of my head, but like fearing for or being worried about your well-being and safety. And he's like, well, yeah, that's not what I felt like guarding good player. I wasn't like concerned for my safety. I'm an athlete. I
wasn't terrified for my life.
But it's like, okay, this is dumb. I also wonder like where like these quotes come from, because it'll be like the NBA Central on Twitter, and they'll be like an anonymous player says that they didn't fear LeBron. It's like, in what context? Because it's anonymous, right? Was it an interview where the guy was like blacked out and had the distorted voice, so you couldn't tell which player it was, and he was like delivering this manifesto on like LeBron's not scary to guard? Or was it something he like casually said at one time where he's like, yeah, LeBron
with the boys,
like, and then it like circulated, and then or did he like DM NBA Central directly? It's like, where do these things even come from? I swear that they're just getting like made up or something like that.
Okay, here's what I want people to think about, right? If you've ever just like been to a basketball court, like the YMCA or just like any pickup game, right? It doesn't matter how good you are talking shit. You are. You're like, I'm just like, bro, you can't guard me. It's like, bro, I'm blocking you. To like, everyone is saying, no one's being like, I'm so scared of you, man. Please don't line up against me.
I also don't think like anyone would have said that about Jordan or Kobe, like in the eras that they played in. Like no player would be like, yeah, man, I'm just so fucking scared. after the career is over, you may go back and say like, oh, back in our generation, like legendary Michael Jordan, like I was scared. But like no current player is going to be like, I am shaking in my boots right now, dude.
I am getting cooked tonight.
All right, I got to ask on Twitter, who do you think in the NBA is most scared of LeBron? Anonymous player says I'm really fearful of LeBron, and I sit out the games we play against him.
This would be like asking, like, is James Harden unforgettable? Like what?
Yes, we thought of a little game before the show because we were so frustrated about how all of these debates go down about players and terms that we decided to just make something up, and we're going to post the following clip on TikTok about us debating if James Harden is an unforgettable player. And we're going to see if we can just go viral just by debating some like stupid bullshit on like, will we forget about James Harden one day?
Like, what the hell does that mean?
What does that mean?
No, exactly. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything.
What does unforgettable mean is...
So basically for those that are watching the podcast on YouTube or on Spotify, you will have this context of this being a bit. But if you're watching on TikTok or Reels or Shorts or whatever short form platform you're watching on, you will think that we are being dead ass about this debate.
Is he unforgettable?
Yeah, is he unforgettable? So BLAIDEN, let's. So we need a starting point to cut it, and so that we could. So exactly. Just like, do you think James Harden is a unforgettable player? Like, let's. So
Matt, Theo, I have to ask you: is James Harden an unforgettable player? Matt, I will start with you.
No, I mean, to me, if we're defining somebody as unforgettable, that has to mean that you can't tell the story of the NBA without him. And to me, if I'm talking to my kids about what happened in my era of the NBA when I was growing up, I can leave out James Harden and they can know everything they need to know. So I'd say he's not unforgettable.
Totally fair. I'm forgetting about James Harden.
I think that's a absolutely crazy thing to say. I think that James Harden is one of the most unforgettable players that we've had in a long time. First of all, he shoots a lot of free throws, which are the most unforgettable plays in basketball. The whole game stops. There's a spotlight on you as you step up to the line and shoot these baskets. What is more memorable than that? The whole game stops and it focuses on James Harden over and over and over again. His style, unforgettable. He also went to Arizona State University, the biggest school in the country. And so more people statistically are fans of James Harden than any other basketball player in the world. 3, he's got the beard, the signature look. This is very important. Whenever I see anybody with a beard, I say that guy looks a lot like James Harden. Throughout my day, I'm consistently thinking about James Harden all the time. One of the most unforgettable, and there's many more like me. I think he's completely unforgettable.
There's only one thing
Great point,
that I really remember about the NBA from year to year. I don't think about who had the most free throws or who was the best at drawing fouls or who had a really good attempt but came up short. I think about who won the championship. I think about the players who won the championship because that's the actual goal of the game. And James Harden has done that how many times?
0 times.
He sucks. Okay.
Excellent point, Matt.
He's a
excellent
player.
analysis.
Oh my God.
I will be forgetting James Harden.
No. Stop that right now. You better not.
There's only one thing you want to do in the NBA: win a championship.
Is
he
James
Harden
done
that any times, dude?
Is James Harden unforgettable? Who?
Who's that?
Who?
James. He's got to be one of the most forgettable superstars. Top 10 most forgettable superstars.
How many super teams has James Harden been on? Well, that largely depends on whether or not you classify him as a superstar himself, and what about the players around him. In this essay, I will.
How many unforgettable players has James Harden played with? That's the real question.
Well, Chris Paul is unforgettable.
Chris
Kyrie
Paul,
is
on the other hand.
James Harden forgettable. Chris Paul, though, that guy
James
will
Harden
be remembered
himself forgettable.
forever.
Chris Paul legendary. Kyrie controversial. KD deep bag. This all combines into the supernova team that James Harden has surrounded himself with. I don't know.
True.
We'll see if that actually translates. I don't know if we were quite serious enough.
No,
I did not keep a straight face the entire time.
Is that all you guys got for today?
That is all I got for today.
So thank you all so much for tuning in. It's been an absolute blast discussing the semantics of the NBA with my 2 favorite co-hosts of all time. And as always, until next time, from Corn Boy, Bird Boy, and Lemon Boy, we will catch you all on the flippity flop.